What do you think, Todd? Should I wear my ears?
Absolutely. All right. Good morning, everybody. And Jesse, thanks for wearing your ears. If you guys have never been to Great Wolf Lodge, everybody wears ears. So I am getting over a cold, or I guess COVID actually. So I have a little bit of a cough. So if I cough, I do pre-apologize. And it is 11 a.m. and then we're going to get started. So good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. And I am excited as Titan HST puts on a series of webinars to discuss important topics when it comes to emergency management and how we can keep our clients and customers safe throughout, our prospective businesses. My name is Todd DeVoe, and I'm the host of Titan HST's Business Continuity Podcast. I'm also the moderator for this conversation today, and we're super excited for this whole webinar series, like I said. And we have another webinar coming up next month about going back to school safety. And so please stand by for more information on that. Titan HST's webinar series is bringing you great speakers with great information and substantial discussions and topics around important safety and emergency management. In case you missed our webinars, we will have them live, or not live, we'll have them rebroadcasted on our YouTube channel as well. And so in a week or two, you'll be able to find this webinar as well, and you can share it with your friends and colleagues. We will take questions and answers at the end of this conversation. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Jessie Dallaire. Jessie is currently serving as the guest services and security at Great Wolf Lodge in Southern California. Jessie's been in the hospitality profession for approximately 17 years of customer service and operations and leadership experience. And we're talking about some of the leadership stuff prior to starting the show. And I'm really kind of happy to hear that Jessie does embrace the concept of servant leadership and really trying to promote the people from within his organization. So that's really great. And taking safety and security is foremost for him, and has allowed him to create multiple award-winning teams across multiple states, and he's moved across the country as well. Outside of work, Jessie enjoys playing sports, trading stocks and crypto, and spending time with his wife, Rachel, and their French bulldog, Shadow, which I guess correctly is definitely a black French bulldog. So the Frenchies are kind of cool dogs. If you guys have never gotten to play with them, I highly recommend it. So Jessie, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks very much for the intro, Todd. Happy to be here. As some of you may have guessed, I really preferred trading stocks and crypto prior to this year, but still a fun little pastime for me at this point.
No, absolutely. It can kind of it's like playing the game, which actually you can win money at the same time stretches the crap out of you. So that's always a lot of fun. So Jessie, there we go. Now, security. How did you get into the security and safety side of hospitality?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been sort of in the guest services umbrella through and through for Great Wolf Lodge for almost 13 years now. Prior to this, I managed this. I really picked up security as we sort of came back from our COVID closure. So I've only been on the security side for the last, we'll call it 1.5 years, 2 years. But I've actually been on the safety side for a number of years. So we actually have a safety committee, at which point, when you mentioned that I moved across the country, this is my 5th state that I've worked in. And when I was positioned out in North Carolina some 10, 11 years ago, I joined the safety committee, and I helped sort of the strategy and shaping of some of the procedures that we still use today for this company since we've been growing so quickly. That said, a lot of it's input based. We've got a corporate team that excels at, alongside our legal team, finding the right EAPs and things like that in place, which hopefully I can share some of that info with you guys today.
Absolutely. So when you're taking a look at hospitality in general, and this is coming from somebody who's a layperson when it comes to hospitality, right? I see 2 different types of properties, or maybe 3, right? You have like your small, motel, if you will, right side motel, that maybe has like 20, 30 rooms. You have a larger hotel, which maybe has like a pool and some other services. And then you go to like the full blown, like hospitality, where you have like what you guys have, basically an amusement park inside of your hotel. You like take a look at Vegas and things like this, where there, all sorts of venues associated with it. Are you taking a look at each of one of these type of hospitality properties in a different mindset when you come to safety and security?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you talk about safety perspective and security as well, there's best practices naturally that you're going to find across every walk of life, across every type of property. But certainly, you need to tailor make a plan for your specific area. And I think that extends beyond hospitality and into everything, right? So when you consider a motel, 30, 40, 50 rooms, and now we're looking at the back end on the resort world, whether it's a Great Wolf Lodge, whether it's a Disney, whether it's anything else. I mean, there even cruise ships have such a variety of offerings that security is going to be a much different animal than it is when you've got very little flow through. I mean, the sheer number of people would cause you to probably make some different ideas and have some contingencies in place. That said, I think the principles tend to be roughly the same.
So, and you guys are unique in the sense that you are a family oriented property, but like really focusing on the younger kids, with a lot of your programming and stuff. So
Mhm.
that makes sense. So when it comes to that, I mean, like I had the opportunity to stay at one of your properties in Scottsdale, great property. And like, yeah, I mean, like if you don't like loud kids running around, this is definitely not the place for you, because they are having fun. Those kids are having a blast, just and they're all just running all over the place. Like you don't know who's who in the zoo. You know, how do you guys keep track of like the kids and like where they're not necessarily track of them, but like like if you have a missing child or whatever, like what's the process like that for you?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's sort of nice. You're right in the fact that there's a lot of people here. That said, it's still a much more intimate location for us, contained within the hotel and the resort itself, versus, say, like an outdoor theme park where it's just so expansive and there's fewer barriers to have in place where kids don't have to hit a wall or a door that they can't get. So one of the things that we do is we train our staff to look for kids that are without adults. To your point, our demographic age is probably 3 to 14 on average. Families with kids 3 to 14. You're going to have some older kids that 10, 11, 12. Parents feel completely comfortable them being by themselves. We're usually going to ask the parents to stick by them, but at the same token, while we're not babysitting, we are keeping our eyes open. So no kid has ever run out the gate, because our teams and the valet team and the parking gate team are aware of what to look for, and then we'll kind of hold them until we can get in touch with their folks and make sure that they're okay. Um, to that end, we do have all of our guests wearing wristbands as well, so we can identify who is a guest. Again, the keys will access certain common areas of the building. They don't let them backstage, for example. You also don't want people to buzz out without valid parking cards and things like that. One, from a revenue perspective to cover finances, but at the same token, it's a safety perspective too. So we have the ability to shut down parking tickets, shut off wristbands, block off certain access points and doors at a moment's notice through the control system that we use, which is Salto. So Salto Systems does a good RFID technology portion.
So when it comes to managing your staff, and specifically let's talk about the cleaning staff right now, because of some of the laws that just were passed. California and Los Angeles just passed a law, and signed Friday by the mayor, talking about the fact that everybody who works anything more than 40 rooms, I think, or 45 rooms, somewhere on there, has to have a RFID panic card that you have to wear. I'm showing my chest, but it could be anywhere. It could be a wrist. Has to be a
Right.
wearable device. Um, like, what do you guys do for your staff on that end? And that's first part of it. But the second part of that question is how do laws like that impact your operations and your decision making process?
Yeah, so good point. And it's important to note right now that this was LA County that got this approved. We do offer optional panic alarms, if you will, and they come in, like you said, a variety of shapes and sizes. Ours specifically look like little key fobs that once you disconnect, and all you have to do is pull it from the keychain, and it emits a really piercing, loud sound, which alerts other staff members nearby that there may be someone who needs assistance as well. And it acts as a deterrent for guests. Obviously, any sort of alarm system like that can sometimes break their thought process on what they were expecting to do. The impact to the operational standpoint is less than you might imagine. Something like that specifically, I mean, there's some dollars that are spent on acquiring the correct device and any software that goes along with managing that, but it's usually well and beyond a reasonable amount. I mean, we've got, to put in perspective, we've got about 700 employees at our peak season for our. Now, because of the nature of the work, we usually really just give it to the housekeeping staff if they're interested in that. Most take it because you never know. But fortunately, we haven't had to use very many. So we do a good job of sort of being proactive on the safety piece. So with that, there's equally important things where rather than just put someone in a room with a panic alarm, there are things and steps that you can do to effectively mitigate getting to that point. An example is the housekeeping carts are pretty heavy. Part of the standard operating procedure for cleaning a room is such that you prop the door open, you leave it open at all times so that there is visibility into what's going on. And then you actually block your room with the heavy housekeeping cart, which would take a potential, agitator for the pack member in case. Few seconds of moving the cart, getting it out of the way, enough time so that they could potentially see this and react as to, hey, what the heck's going on? This is unusual, and then pull the panic alarm rather than have someone sneak up on them. So that's pretty important as well.
Excuse me. And so when you're looking at these procedures, do you practice them with your staff? I mean, like what's that like? How do you go through the training side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So training's important. There's a whole book on adult learning theory that I'll spare you the details of, but effectively you want to explain why everything is as important as it is. And I think any good trainer already knows this innately. But the idea is you not only share how to do it, what to do, and why you do it, but then you have someone walk through the process visually for those folks who are visual, and then you give them an opportunity to do it and provide immediate feedback for a little while before you cut them loose on themselves. And that covers those folks that are kinesthetic learners and want to do it and touch it and feel it and see themselves. I think realistically, the things that are in place from a safety perspective are once described, it makes a lot of sense to people. It's almost immediate that you'll get buy off. And that's really important. Get buy off. These are going to be consistent over the next however many months and years that they'd work for you. They know that that's in place for their safety. So therefore it just gets done.
How does your security team integrate with, say, your housekeeping team? Like, do they have a regular meetings together? Like, what's that like?
Yeah, so being that I get to oversee the security team and the guest services team, I actually share financial checkbooks for our hotel with our housekeeping director. So whether it's over a golf course or over meetings at work and coffee, we're consistently connected by the hip from a checkbook perspective, and that gives us a lot of opportunity to talk through issues. I think where you're kind of getting is how does safety really transition from security to housekeeping. And the reality is it's not just security. We actually have, being that we're a water park, our aquatics team that does safety as an aside to that. So they are effectively aquatics and safety. And we do monthly tabletops and monthly trainings for each department. We also hold quarterly roundtables, and we debrief after every emergency session. So if there's an EAP or an emergency action plan that's called in, the leadership team will get together, debrief, and we'll kind of learn from what could have gone better, what we did well. And it has allowed us to create this culture of safety that effectively the pack can perpetuate this to our guests, because every single person is dialed in and understands, what our variety of codes are. One of the things that we do to easily differentiate between these things is we use a system of color coding, what we call different codes, based on a situation that we need to react to. And just as an example of that, it's California. So if we have an earthquake, thing called a code shake, which is a entire month-long training process. Every pack member that month gets an update on code shake, and then we quiz them. And during the time that we're quizzing them, if there's an answer wrong, we notate it. We come back and we do a full retraining for that person as well.
And that's a good point, because depending on where you are throughout the country, the hazards are that you're concerned about are a little bit different. So for instance, like I would say, like in the southeast, obviously hurricanes are a concern over there.
Yeah.
What do you do? What's your overarching plan to do with guests if they can't move? I mean, even COVID's like a good example where they couldn't fly or whatever.
Mhm.
What do you do with guests at that point? Like, do you have a contingency plan for them, or?
Yeah. So in the event that you mean guests can't leave the resort, for example, or
Yeah,
staff. Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a human element, even if financially it doesn't make perfect sense. I'll give you an example from some time I spent up in Massachusetts. We had a severe weather winter storm. We actually call that severe weather a code white. So in a code white, you could experience loss of power, ice and snow buildup on the roads. It could be, like you mentioned, a hurricane or a cyclone where you effectively have no recourse. You tether items down and kind of hope the building stands up. One of the cool things about our property is that we can evacuate guests. So you've all heard the term evacuate. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll put guests in a separate area of the building. If, for example, the air conditioning goes out or power goes out and it starts to get really cold up in Massachusetts, we've got an 80-degree water park that stays fairly humid all day. We can have folks line up in there, and we can set
right.
up beds and air mattresses, sheets, blankets, whatever, and folks can stay in there if they really need to. That said, it's few and far between that you get an emergency situation like that. It can happen. So
Right.
most of the time we end up working out a deal where if it's the guest's choice, then we will charge them an extremely low rate just to cover cost of the room. If they had been staying in there previously, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll just extend out an additional night, but it's going to be dependent on the situation, obviously.
Right.
Most of the time we'll defer to recommendations made by the state. So for example, if in the state of California, we declared a state of emergency for a various reason, our company would be super willing to help manage through that process and be there for the community that we surround as well.
Speaking of communities, I know that the community partnerships are critical. How do you guys reach out to the surrounding community where your property is at? Is it something you do on a regular basis, or is it just ad hoc?
It's ad hoc, and we've got channels. So obviously, if we're reaching out for a partnership event, a lot of times what'll happen is it's either going to be some form of human resources element where it's the HR team that speaks to someone else, whether it's a hiring fair with the local college or high school, whether it's just an outreach program where we're looking to do some donations and try to spread some goodwill. A lot of times that'll happen. If it ends up being more media driven, where it's like a parade, i.e. the Garden Grove Strawberry Festival every year, our sales and PR team will kind of handle that piece. Then again, we also have our national accounts. So we do some community outreach on a brand wide standpoint with companies like Make-A-Wish, with folks at Big Brothers Big Sisters, and with Autism Speaks. Those tend to be partners of choice for us. And we commit at the beginning of the year X thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars, whatever it is, to the community pot, that they can turn around and then do some good with those monies as well.
And so people may not know. I mean, like if they haven't been to your property, it might sound to them it's just like a water park inside of a hotel, which is
Yeah.
partly true, you know.
Yeah.
But you have other things that you do as well. You have a pretty decent sized convention space, so you have a lot of moving parts. How do you manage like all those moving parts? Like, say you have a convention with, say, 1,000 people upstairs. and then you have of course the things going on. How do you manage that on a regular flow?
We manage it like we're playing chess. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different venues, offerings, product, services. The conference center, like you mentioned, it's 13 breakout spaces across 23,000 square feet. I mean, we this week, for example, we've got a group that's booked the entire conference center, and there's 100 to 200 cheerleaders from various high schools up there chanting and cheering. And I like to assume they're doing it for us, but we know. Yeah, and to that end, we'll find times and contract times to do specific meals, or we'll do meals up in the conference center for them. What it does is it kind of creates a different guest flow than what you normally would experience when there is no convention business or group business. And so for that area, it's really important that all of the various leaders understand how that flow will impact their specific lines of business. From a safety standpoint, before the cheer teams get up and do their routines, we have a complete sit down where it's almost like an auditorium session where our safety lead from our aquatics team will come up and dictate safety rules. Like, here's what the expectation is for your camp. And we get immediate buy-off partners that host these events.
With your plan, I know we spoke about this before, that you have your local plan, and there's a certain level to just you guys keep handle in-house right there at your property. But then at some point, you may have to send this up through your corporation chain of command. What's the decision-making process on that? And then what information do you share right away with your with the national chain?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's dependent on the situation. If you're going to have anything that's going to be excessive, what we call NPS detractor, and NPS, for those of you not familiar, it's a acronym that stands for Net Promoter Score. It's effectively a question which is the likelihood or the intent to recommend, which is a gauge on customer service. So if there's going to be a big hit to the customer satisfaction piece, if there's going to be a big hit financially, or if we feel like this would garnish building damage or potentially even media attention, those automatically will be escalated. Now, there's immediate steps that you take to inform the folks locally about what's going on so that we can take action. And then there's the next step over, which is let's communicate this to get some additional support, some additional resources, and then also to clue people in so they're not blindsided finding out on CBS News. Right. So to that end, things like domestic disputes and things like that might affect 20 to 30 people, we're not going to reach out and send that up the chain. It'll be included in our reports, but that's not going to be something that's going to be significant. Whereas, if we are a water park, if someone has a medical condition and it's causing some problems and they're in the dead center of the water park, these days, Todd, everyone's got a cell phone out filming this. So of course, if we see, 40 to 50 cameras, regardless of the reason that this person's having a challenge, we're going to immediately attend to the person, but we're also going to send a note up. And depending on what the situation is, again, you send it to different folks. In this particular case with the media transaction, we'd send it to the media guy and he'd be on the look what's going on. Most of the time we'll send it to our corporate risk manager, who's really tethered in well with our legal team and with the regional vice presidents. We would copy as well. And that would give them effectively a little bit of insight into what was going on in the property. Now, the really cool thing is we've got some great executives in this company that are willing to support and do whatever we need to do. I guarantee you, if the question was, hey, we need you out here, they'd be on the next flight out. So some really, really good top-notch leadership on that front.
That's great. And it's great to see that the leadership is really supporting the safety side of things as well, not just the corporate image, with talk about your risk guy. Speaking of risks, what are the risks that you try to, I guess we try to mitigate all of our risks, yeah. But what are the major risks? What are the major concerns that you have that you're working on a regular basis?
Yeah, so being in California, and like you said, this sort of varies from location. There's, most of us down here know them as transients. You've got folks that are potentially homeless or, residentially living in the immediate vicinity without an actual address. And these folks tend to try to find their way into the building and make themselves a little niche, whether it's in the garage or I've had one guy, take an elevator and climb onto the roof after. So I mean, they'll go just about anywhere they feel safe. So it's really important to have decent CCTV camera footage. It also helps you catch things like potential hazards and context being what I mentioned earlier. If you've got a gentleman who walks in with a rifle, that's a massive red flag at a place like this.
Right.
Even if antique that's not loaded, that's a concern for us. So there's things that you're on the lookout for. Those are two of the more common ones. Anyone with there's a lot of kids, a lot of fun, a lot of screaming. So it's part of our team does a good job of really understanding, are these screams pleasant screams, kids having fun? Is people arguing? If there's an argument, even a domestic argument between a husband and wife, even if it's not come to blows, we're not going to turn a blind eye. We're going to go over and intervene. And I mean, there may be a very valid reason for the argument, and we're going to ask them just to, based again on the demographic that we're serving, if they can take it either elsewhere, or if it gets to the point, we sometimes have to strong arm and say, hey, look, we've already asked you twice. This is it. You got to go.
Yeah.
And we're not beyond that, because our mission is to bring joy to families. And how much joy can you really bring when you got two people in the middle of a crowded lobby that are yelling obscenities at each other?
Right. And that lobby, just to kind of put in perspective, for those who have not visited, the lobby actually has like activities. It's not just a lobby. It has like the story time thing, dancing, where the kids are dancing in the lobby, all sorts of neat things that are happening for the families in the lobby. So it's not it's not just a place for people to check in and check out, right?
Yeah, it's not just the coffee table where you grab your fixing and go. It's you're right, it's a hangout spot. We've got activities peppered in from 8 a.m. to about 9 p.m. So there's consistently dozens of families doing something. And then obviously during the check-in rush, you've got potentially upwards of 100 to 200 people just kind of in the lobby vicinity. And if something goes down in the lobby, you're going to find out pretty quick.
So, excuse me. You guys are unique in the sense of who you cater to, but you're not unique in the sense of like, you have a full service hotel with, or hospital, I guess it's hotel, with your restaurants, a couple of different ones. You have national partners with like Baskin Robbins and Dunkin' Donuts, and Build-A-Bear, right? So there's a lot of different managing things that you have going on at the property. Do you bring everybody on board on the safety side of saying like, this is what we got going on? Does each individual area have its own safety plan? What does that look like?
Yeah, a little bit. So what we do when we have our orientation, or as we like to call wolfology, wolfology is sort of a HR policy, leveling of expectations, and then big component on safety. So we spend a significant portion of the time in wolfology covering each of our codes and the colors and what you do in case of XYZ. From those situations, each department then, as part of the training, expounds on that and effectively gives them their location specific area rules, if you will. I'll kind of cite an example of that is in a fire emergency, the standard policy is that you would evacuate the building, right? You would evacuate guests, you would evacuate yourselves. You would go to our rendezvous point, paying attention to lost children. We've got a special designated area for all that. But if you're on the food and beverage side, especially if you're a cook, you have additional responsibilities to turn off the burners and make sure that, any gas and things like that are shut down before exiting the building. And only if it's safe to do so. Obviously, if there's a fire that burns out in the kitchen, grab it and go. But the reality is when we have a significant emergency that's affecting the entire hotel, you now have to take under advisement, what's going on in your immediate area. Obviously, if there's a situation where we're evacuating and it's completely opposite side of the building, we would want cashiers and things like that to shut the gates so that people can't go into the building and either hide out or whatever else. So to that end, we would close the gates, and we actually have Knox boxes around the property with keys so that the fire department can get into any gated area they need to get. So effectively, to your point, you get the full treatment as a group when you're being onboarded, and then you get the localized individual treatment by your respective supervisor in the area that you'll be working.
So it sounds like to me that you really have a culture of safety amongst everybody who works for you. Is that well embraced by all the employees?
Yeah, it is. Back in 2014 or so, we rolled out what is still today the current safety culture, and the acronym is SAFE, SAFE, and it stands for safety always for everyone. And effectively, this safe culture has had various iterations, and every year, one of the things with training is it's important to keep things fresh, right? So every year, we as a safety committee at each of the properties get to form our own safety motto, our own sort of yearly plan. And these plans are all based on the same goal, which is making sure that we reduce incidents, that we are as proactive as possible, and that we're keeping our eyes peeled for any opportunities to improve. And through the safety committee, you've got a blend of leadership and line level pack members that are super committed to safety, and they take it upon their shoulders to go out and teach every other person that we've got in the building about what our regulations and what our processes are. And it's almost to the point, Todd, where it becomes annoying, and that's a good thing. If you're annoyed by it, that means you're so comfortable and you've heard it so many times that it should just be reactionary when you do have to actually take effect and do something.
Absolutely. What advice would you give to other hotel and motel operators when it comes to safety for your staff and guests?
Yeah, don't skimp on it. That would probably be my top piece. Make sure they have the tools and resources they need to stay safe and do their jobs appropriately. Safety can be a lot of things. It doesn't have to be emergency action. Sometimes it's, train people on how to pick up boxes, heavy contents, train them on how to use electric pallet jacks, train them on how to use a ladder, how to use knives. Make sure you've got Kevlar gloves in the kitchen so you don't accidentally slice off a finger. There's so many things to it. I would just say, if you don't have time to focus on safety, find someone who you can allow time to really put that in place, because there's no substitution from a business perspective on maintaining safety. It's way cheaper in the long run than having to deal with things on the back end. And I can tell you, in a state like California with so much litigation, you have to do it.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of interesting enough, we're seeing a lot of union activity coming in, like what happened in the city of Los Angeles.
Yep.
You're seeing it happening over in Vegas. And right now there's 14 states that have passed laws or regulations specifically aimed at, I guess we're talking about the panic cards for their housekeeping staff. But should that, in your opinion, should that expand past just the housekeeping staff to like everybody who is inside the building?
So my opinion is that if you're in a public space and you're never alone, you probably don't need it.
Right.
But if you're doing any type of work that's going to require you to either be solo or be put in a position where you might confront a guest one-on-one, it may very well be worth it, regardless of what the actual work done is. And it doesn't have to be just a staff member. It could be a manager. I can think of, I don't know, a sales manager doing a tour with a client. They're going to be walking dark rooms that are really big with nobody in there, nobody around. If there's nothing going on, perhaps they should have one. And I think it should be made accessible. So if I were creating laws, I would say that it should be accessible to people. I believe in the right to choose. But at the same token, I do think that they should be made available personally.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I don't see if we have any questions coming in from the participants. We're kind of at that point right now, but if we don't have a lot of questions coming in, we'll kind of wrap this up a little bit early, which I think is good, right? Because you get to go back, and I know you're busy right now and having everything else being done, and especially with all those cheerleaders on, and I'm sure it's probably managed chaos going on right now at your property.
Yeah, probably drowning out the screams of my team right now.
Outstanding. All right. All right, Jesse, thank you so much for your time today. And if somebody's looking to get a hold of you, how can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Jessie Dallaire. Just look me up. I think I've changed my link so that it's just that. I deleted pretty much every other social platform because it was a time sink, and I've got 2 marriages now, one to my wife and one to my work. Outside of that, you can always find me at the Great Wolf in Anaheim, and I encourage you guys to come out and play one day. Got a lot of cool stuff going on over here.
Absolutely. Jesse, thank you so much for your time today. And everybody, thank you for joining us today. And feel free to reach out and learn from each other when it comes to safety and security, especially in the hotel industry, which, those of you that work in it completely understand it. And I hope that you guys all stay safe and you guys all stay hydrated.
Thanks, Todd. Have a great one.